Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Welcome to the channel if you're a brand new subscriber or a brand new viewer. My name is Kyle. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is hitting theaters on June 30th. And as such, once a month I am talking about one Indiana Jones film leading up to its release. And for the month of May we are talking about 1989's Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. This was once again directed by Steven Spielberg, cinematography by Douglas Slocum, and once again starring Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones. This review will contain heavy spoilers. I'm going to be talking about the whole movie, so in case if you are that one person that has not seen The Last Crusade, you are doing yourself a disservice, go watch the film and come back to this review. Raiders of the Lost Ark, as we all know, is unanimously praised and beloved by fans and critics alike. Temple of Doom had a more mixed reception. And The Last Crusade was Spielberg's attempt at trying to make a lighter film. He didn't want to make something that was dark and sinister like Temple was. He wanted to make something that was more in line with Raiders of the Lost Ark. And as a result, we got a movie that features a few similarities to Raiders. Definitely the Nazis' return is most likely the biggest one. There's also the search for a heavily popularized religious artifact, the Holy Grail. And like I said, there's more of an attempt at trying to make a more upbeat and joyous movie. In my humble opinion, this is my favorite movie of the franchise. I absolutely love The Last Crusade, and this is definitely going to be a bit of a gush fest of a review. But similar to when I talked about Raiders and respectively Temple, this movie has been reviewed so many times, countless times even. People have analyzed it to death after over 30 years. So for me, I wanted to talk about some of my childhood experiences with the movie and try to, like I did with Raiders and Temple, talk about things that I noticed on this rewatch that either I hadn't noticed before or it's just something interesting to note. Right from the get-go, the movie just has a tremendous sense of pace. But it's also interesting because this is in many ways a prequel because it starts out in 1912. We see Indiana Jones as a young man played by the late and great River Phoenix. He was a terrific actor, may he rest in peace. I think it's now been 30 years since he passed away. Very tragic, but Harrison Ford loved working with River Phoenix on the Mosquito Coast, and he actually believed that River Phoenix resembled him the most for when he was a kid. But in just 10 minutes, he brought so much to the table. He's somebody that was always an adventurous person, but somebody who was not yet afraid of snakes. Give that just a minute. He ends up going to this cave and stealing the sacred cross of Coronado, but not without catching the attention of a group of thieves, including a man that is simply named Fedora in the credits, but he looks exactly like how Indiana Jones will look like in the next 20 years. This then leads to a brilliant chase scene, and my god, this movie is absolutely full of chase sequences. Everything from foot chases to horse chases, train sequences, dog fights, tank fights. Everything is in this movie, and it's amazing. After he ends up outsmarting Fedora, and we get this amazing moment where he just says, damn, and he smiles like, this is a really cool kid. He's definitely gonna be somebody someday. He ends up returning to his house to tell his dad what's going on, but his dad could not be less interested in what's going on. The authorities come in, he thinks it's a good thing, turns out Coronado is standing right outside the window. We're definitely gonna see him again in the next scene. All of a sudden, the rest of the guys walk out except for Fedora, who walks up to him and says one of my favorite lines of all time.
You lost today, kid. But it doesn't mean you have to like it.
He puts the hat onto Indy's head. We then transition to Indiana Jones as an adult, once again played by Harrison Ford, who gets a massive punch to the face. It is one of the simplest, but one of the greatest transitions of all time. Because as a kid and as a man, he is still in pursuit of this one artifact. The fact that his dad couldn't be interested, that is beside the point. He himself is passionate and goal-oriented. I absolutely love the fact that we start in the past because you really get to understand the character and how he becomes who he is. His fear of snakes, of course, there's a snake that goes into his pants. I think any man would be scared of that. And how he gets the iconic scratch on the chin, which is something that Harrison Ford got in an automobile accident, I think when he was about 20 years old. Right after an incredible boat sequence featuring an amazing explosion, the plot begins to kick in as Indiana Jones is hired by a man named Walter Donovan to find the missing team leader responsible for trying to track down the sacred Holy Grail. Turns out that team leader is his father, Professor Henry Jones Sr. This is definitely where I want to commend Douglas Slocum's amazing cinematography, and of course with the use of anamorphic lenses. You definitely get this incredible scope in this scene that honestly didn't have to have a wide scope, but it's Indy meeting the villain of the movie, who he doesn't know is the villain yet, played by Julian Glover. An amazing actor, he was, of course, General Veers in The Empire Strikes Back. Now, in this scene, you definitely get a sense that Indy and his father's relationship has not improved in any way, shape, or form. He's like, yeah, the class the students hope they don't get. Attila, the professor, he definitely has a very dismissive attitude, but the moment he realizes that his dad might be in danger, he immediately rushes home. And that's the great thing about Indiana Jones. Despite his resentment and bitterness towards his dad, the fact that he knows he's in trouble, he really cares. He is a very caring person, and that's why we appreciate an anti-hero like Indiana Jones. Now, I mentioned Marcus in my Raiders review, and of course, you gotta talk about Marcus Brody here, played once again by Denholm Elliott. He is amazing in this movie. His comedic timing is so good, and even though he is definitely a sillier character than he was in Raiders, he was more stoic and more of a mentor figure. In this movie, I think the comic relief is so great, but he also presents a tremendous ally towards Indiana Jones. He is loyal to him to the bitter end. He's had a lifelong relationship with Indy's father, he watched him grow up. You definitely understand the chemistry and the protectiveness that Marcus has over Indy. It's great stuff, and it's very, very simple. This leads both Indy and Marcus to Venice, Italy, where they meet Dr. Schneider, played by Alison Doody. I feel very sorry for whoever started that last name trend. I have a feeling she got made fun of a lot. But I definitely like her performance as Elsa. Of course, we know the twist because we've all seen the movie, but at first, she is a very classy and beautiful lady. Indy is most certainly smitten with this woman, and their flirtation is very swift, and it's great because she's able to keep up with him so well. This leads to the library sequence in which Indy says in his classroom that X never ever marks the spot, but that is definitely a different case here. I did want to note that this is the first PG-13 rated Indiana Jones, and the fact that Temple of Doom was responsible for creating the rating that The Last Crusade received is kind of funny because I feel like The Last Crusade, after rewatching the original trilogy, it is the least gory by far, and I think it's also the least violent, and definitely the funniest Indiana Jones movie. This movie, it almost feels like an action comedy at times, but the comedy is so well timed. There are sequences in this movie that just have me rolling.
Dr. Jones,
Yes?
I will take the book now.
What book?
Can't believe what you did.
It's fake. See, you can tell with the cross sections.
Hi, yeah? Yes.
Why are you sitting there resting when we're so near the end?
Follow me! I know the way!
Now, as Indy and Elsa are trying to discover the second marker, Spielberg definitely adds more of his James Bond isms with the fact that no matter where Indiana Jones goes, he is always in an immediate sense of danger. We get introduced to Kazim. I think he's a great character, great addition to the movie. The actor playing him does a spectacular job, and this leads to the tremendous boat sequence. I love this fight, especially when Indy goes,
Are you crazy? Don't go between them!
Go between them, are you crazy?
Said go around!
You said go between them!
I said don't go between them!
and this leads to the propeller stunt. I love this moment. There is no way that you could get away with this today. Only in the 80s could you do a sequence like this, because that actually is Harrison Ford on the boat. Great stuff, tremendous stunt work. The first 40 minutes of this movie is just relentless. It is always constantly moving, but the characters and the story are done in such a great manner, because in the next scene, when Indy is talking to Marcus, all of a sudden he goes back to his room and Elsa's and finds out that they've both been trashed. He finds Elsa in the bathroom and she asks, well, what were they looking for? And he takes out the diary. Now, of course, we all know the twist that Elsa is secretly a Nazi. And what is such an intriguing element of this that I didn't think about until this rewatch is the fact that she trashed her own room. And she trashed his room. He literally played right into her hands, and as a result, they have sex with one another. It's a very interesting game of seduction and wits, and proves that she was actually one step ahead of him. So that makes her a very interesting antagonist. The castle they used in the movie was actually a real castle, which is incredible. The introductory sequence is full of comedy. Of course, Indiana Jones realizes that he's up against the Nazis once again, and he crashes through the window, and this is where we get introduced to Professor Henry Jones Sr., played by the one and only Sean Connery. His introduction is legendary, and it is absolutely amazing for Spielberg because Spielberg has always said he's wanted to make a Bond movie. This is the closest he'll ever get because he literally casted the original actor himself to portray Indiana Jones's father. The only way that you could outcool a character like Indiana Jones is to have the actor who originally played James Bond to be his dad. And they have spectacular chemistry. This is, I'd say, the biggest reason why this movie works as well as it does for me. The interactions between these two men are so seamless, and you can tell that they have this sort of bitterness towards each other, and they're very distant from one another. But through this adventure, they're finally able to make a connection. And definitely, Indiana Jones's father is very shocked when his son just mows down a bunch of Nazis, but not before delivering one of my favorite comedy moments, I think, just ever in any movie.
But I thought you were one of them.
Dad, they come in through the doors.
Good point.
Of course, we know the twist about Elsa. We get introduced to Vogel. He is a really, really good antagonist. And of course, we find out the even bigger twist that Donovan has been working with the Nazis all along. And he says, I told you not to trust anyone. It's got one of my favorite smash cuts where Indy talks about how smart Marcus is. And all of a sudden, he's in this foreign territory with no idea how to speak the language. He's so confused. And all of a sudden, Sala appears, which is great. And then there's a man that appears and says, oh, there's a museum. And he goes, oh, there's no museum in Iskandrun. And he makes a joke to say, run, run. And he punches the dude. Great moment, great scene. And the comedy bits just keep going when Henry Jones Sr. lights fire to the room.
Dad! Oh, Dad! Oh, Dad! What?
This entire sequence is great because you can feel the danger of the situation, but it's also hilarious as hell, and it leads to another great scene where he sits down in the chair, the stairs go down, and all of a sudden Indy just falls down the stairs. It's just hilarious stuff. And then it leads to the motorcycle chase. Good God. This movie, oh my God, I love this film so much. If you cannot tell by now, I definitely had so much fun rewatching this movie, and talking about it is just as fun because I'm thinking about every sequence in my head. The stunt work in this scene is great, but my favorite element of it is the fact that Henry Jones Sr. is not fascinated at all with the stuff his son is doing. He's kind of bored, as a matter of fact. But then it leads to a great line of dialogue before they enter Berlin, where they talk about what they need for the diary. And of course he says, I wrote them down in my diary so I wouldn't have to remember them. And they have this bitter argument, and all of a sudden he says, Jesus Christ, and he slaps him. That moment still gives me chills, because despite the fact that they have this bitter resentment towards each other, his dad does not accept blasphemy. It's just a great moment and a great sequence. You really get to understand the characters so much more in just this little sequence. But of course, this scene does take us to Berlin with the book burning sequence. The interesting fact I knew about this scene is the fact that the majority of the Nazi uniforms were actually recovered SS uniforms from 1945. It's a bit terrifying when you think about that, and I am very sure that they burned them after the production ended, but it adds to the authenticity of the scene, particularly because Indiana Jones backs right into Adolf Hitler. This scene is absolutely spine-tingling, even with the fact that the literal book that Hitler is searching for is right in front of him, but he can't see it. It's chilling stuff, but it actually is kind of comical at the same time. Next we come to the Zeppelin. This movie just knows how to escalate. But Spielberg and screenwriter Jeffrey Baum definitely wanted to highlight even more of the tension between father and son. It's illustrated so well that they just don't really know each other. And by the time Henry Jones Sr. asks Indy to talk about anything, he goes, I can't really think of anything because you just were never there. There's really no interest to want to talk to you. And he goes, well, what are you complaining about? This leads to the plane sequence, which then leads to an amazing car chase sequence. And there is a terrific shot of the plane in the background as it's shooting towards the car. It's one of my favorite shots of all time. But it's now without an amazing coda as Henry Jones Sr. takes out the umbrella, shoots it at all the birds go up, and all of a sudden the plane just explodes into the side of a cliff. And he goes, I suddenly remembered my Charlemagne. And he walks away, and you just have the camera linger on the Dana Dolly of Indiana Jones looking at his dad going, did my dad just do that? I didn't mention the name Vic Armstrong in both Raiders or Temple, and I did myself a disservice there, but I want to talk about him here because he was Harrison Ford's stunt double. And the two look very similar to each other. It's kind of scary. So in Temple of Doom, there were a lot of moments where Harrison Ford couldn't be there because he had a back injury, so Vic Armstrong would take over, but you just couldn't tell the difference between the two of them. And in this movie, it features one of my favorite stunts, if not possibly my favorite stunt in any movie, where he jumps from the horse onto the tank. It's such a well-calculated stunt. It's done in one take. There's no heavy wire work. It is a man jumping from a horse onto a tank. He has the tremendous fight with Vogel, which leads to him on the side of a tank as it barrels into the side of a wall, and that was actually Harrison Ford that performed those stunts. It is amazing what this man decided to do, especially back in the 80s. Now, the exterior as they go through the canyon actually does exist in Petra, Jordan. It's great. I definitely hope to go there one day. The set they built on the inside is tremendous, and the stakes are at their absolute highest when Donovan shoots Indy's father. The craziest thing I did not notice until this rewatch is that he shoots Sean Connery with a Walther. I imagine Spielberg was talking to the prop department and he goes, how amazing would it be if James Bond was to get shot by the very gun that he held in his movies? Indy is faced to go at these 3 challenges alone, but the beauty of this scene is that you can hear his father's voice as he goes through the challenges. It's almost like they're going through the challenges together. That is, to me, the heart and soul of this movie. And I really feel like it's why this movie is as strongly received as it is. The first 2 challenges are great, although with the very first challenge, I don't know how that wheel was able to properly stay in place after all those hundreds of years, but definitely the third challenge is the coolest one to me. It's a leap of faith. He has to believe.
You must believe, boy. You must believe.
Takes that foot out, and all of a sudden, there is a bridge that appears. Even though the effect does look a bit dated, it's still a tremendous moment, and I can't imagine what the audience must have felt like back in '89 seeing that. They must have been cheering. He comes across the knight who is definitely experiencing old age, and of course, he is the knight with 1,000 memes because he is the man who says he chose poorly. But it makes total sense why this would be both a meme and a gif, considering the fact that Walter Donovan drinks a very gold and sacred chalice and he meets his demise in an effect that honestly looks really cool. It's not as grotesque as the end of Raiders when they open up the Ark, but it's definitely a great effect. Of course, Elsa doesn't listen when the knight tells her to not cross the seal, and I do find it awkward that Indiana Jones calls her honey. Like, dude, she was in league with the Nazis. There is no sympathy for her whatsoever. So when she dies, it's not emotional at all. I'm just like, all right, bye. What is emotional is Indy's father calling him Indiana rather than Junior. He calls him Indiana and tells him to let it go. His son is more important to him than the artifact he was searching for his entire life. And as they escape out of the building, he asks his dad what he learned, and his father says, illumination. And that is the perfect way to end this movie. They end up riding into the sunset, and that concludes Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Wow, man, this is a goddamn masterpiece of a film. The movie was able to up the ante with the comedy, action, and drama, and also include things like rats, which they literally bred for the production. That's kind of terrifying when you think about it. But this movie manages to have a tremendous heart. It has such a grand amount of emotion, and I feel like that is what pushes it to be my favorite Indiana Jones movie. And at times, I feel like it's the best Indiana Jones movie. If there is one gripe I have with the movie, it's the aerial dogfight sequence. I do think the effects in it are very bad. It's very unconvincing. They're definitely on a blue screen. All in all, guys, I love The Last Crusade. It gives me everything that I want. And it features one of my favorite actors, Sean Connery, as Indiana Jones' father. That is tremendous right there. The movie, to me, it really is as great as they come, and it is one of my favorite action films, and definitely still, to this day, my favorite Indiana Jones film. And of course, I'm going to give Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade the coveted A+. If you stuck to the end of this review, I thank you very much. Next month, we're going to be talking about Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. This will definitely be a very interesting review because I have a lot of points to make about that film. In the meantime, guys, do not forget to subscribe to the channel and give the video a like. The links to my social media pages, including my website, kjgpictures.com, can be found in the description box below. Thank you all so much as always for watching, and stay tuned.